It's Kirblog. Goo, 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 goo. Hi, it's late. I am I'm recording this after having attempted sleeping for about half an hour and was thinking about talking about some stuff. And this is going to be another one of those. I'm just hitting the record button and doing a stream of consciousness Kirblog topic. Not sure when this one is going to come out. It'll be sometime within August, I'm assuming. But yeah, I was thinking about a particular. I'll even say actually, I was intending on doing this one with a guest. So I apologize if that guest happens to hear this one later. I mean, with no offense, just kind of got hit with a little bit of inspiration to want to talk about this, and just figured kind of while the thoughts were sifting around in my head, I might as well address them while I was thinking of them. So this is a question that was submitted anonymously on Tumblr a while ago, asking, "Hey Curb, I have a very important question to ask about being social. Clearly, as an artist, it's important to be social and make friends, but I myself am very shy and timid. You, however, seem social. Could you give some tips or help on how I could open up?" So I guess to start, just to give a little bit of prefacing information, I consider myself to be more of an extroverted person. I know that the differences between introvert and extrovert and the kind of grays between that have shifted a lot, especially within the digital age. But I'll say that I've always generally been a pretty outgoing person. I certainly appreciate my times of getting to be alone and focus and relax. But I'm a social creature by nature. I've always held very tightly to my friends and family and anybody who I have a kind of mutual understanding with of any kind. And that's always been a big part of what makes me who I am. And I've done a lot of ruminating about not just because of the question that was submitted for this, but just kind of about this, and as I witness a lot of people from within my own generation and some of the newer generations, both people who are younger who I've met through the viewership of my own work, or just through social media and just mutual people and things, just people who are a little younger than I am, etc., and kind of witnessing the differences in how we as people have changed, and how the world has changed, and how we befit ourselves to it, because the not to get, I guess, too airy fairy hippy dippy about this or whatever, both of those are good descriptions, clearly. Good job, Chris. Humans in our evolution is very radically different from any other living being on Earth, in that we evolve through sociality, and that evolution, not in the literal sense, but more so in the in the moment sense, for each of the the relatively short amount of time that we're alive and on this earth and allowed to walk it in whatever way that we choose. Learning is such an extremely important thing. Something that maybe this will come off very blunt, but a sort of catch-all description that I've had, and I think I have definitely talked about this before, and maybe even used this example in the same sort of blunt manner, but my sort of catch-all answer for the general kind of gist of not just this question, but just this subject in general, for moving forward and finding inspiration, being creative, and improving as a person, and opening up, etc. That answer that I often give is, you got to have a life. Especially if this is the case for everybody ever, but especially for people who are artists, who are creatives, of which a lot of people who follow my work are, who are people who want to pursue doing their own stuff and find their own creativity, which is awesome. Obviously, that's not everybody, but I've noticed a trend of a lot of people who are kind of in that realm and seek some kind of guidance. And again, while I never profess to be any kind of expert or artiste at any of that shit, because I am still very, very much. And when I say I'm learning, I mean I'm learning in a very day-to-day sense, not in a like I've reached this point and I'm pretty on top of my shit. Like, no, there's still very basic things about life that I am learning, and things about myself that I'm learning. And the reason that I have been able to learn those things is because of the fact that I created a life for myself. I was very, I've said this many times before as well. I came from a very, privileged background in terms of, my parents, were very, very caring of me and did a lot for me. And I had a lot of stuff in life handed to me. And it wasn't until I started, if anything, actually, because I knew what I wanted to do with my life in terms of my career from a very young age, when I realized, okay, but if I want to make these things happen for myself, I have to pursue that on my own. And those things aren't going to be handed to me. And it's going to take a very, very long time and a lot of very, very hard work and patience and effort to do that. Kind of learning that in and of itself opened up the idea of learning more and more and more in a way that I never thought about in my younger years. And I think that this is something probably for the most part, like American suburban kids, can probably look back on in their later years and realize. But, like in the Kirblog I did earlier this year about surviving high school, I think I was talking about how, the truth of the matter is that, at the end of the day, most of the stuff that we're learning, like in our classes for, most of grade school all the way up until the end of high school, it's true that by and large, most of that information doesn't really come into play majorly in our adulthood, unless in cases where, one of those specific subjects that we studied, which it tends to be at least one of them, if not several, hopefully combined together. Those are the things that we hone in on because we relate to them and they click with us or whatever, and we really fine tune ourselves and the rest of our lives into focusing on improving in those aspects and those things that we desire to do, and more of what we actually learn from those years of our lives and going from kindergarten to our senior years of high school is we learn a lot about ourselves and we learn a lot about other people, which is arguably just as, if not maybe even in some ways more important than math, science, social studies, English, etc. Not to say those things aren't important too, of course, and anything that we can learn. But the reason I bring that up is because I think that especially when we're kids and we're just we go through the bouts of selfishness and and just whatever we can comprehend in our lives, with the limited amount of knowledge that we have. I think that as kids, just in general, our species, we can sometimes take learning for granted. We think that like whatever is relevant to us is all that matters. We just focus so much on that and just getting through the day, and specifically because it has to do with, we focus on whatever it is that makes us happy. And that is important. It is important to be happy and to be, because happiness goes in tandem generally with healthiness. So it's certainly not to denounce that either, but, and especially this applies in the case of just sociality. One of the most difficult, painful, and important things in our lives is breaking out of our comfort zone and not living in, I'm going to say, a safety bubble. Now, feeling safe and secure is also extremely important, not only because it has to do with our happiness, but it has to do with our well-being, our mental and emotional and physical stability. That is extremely important. But there's a difference between feeling safe, like legitimately safe and secure, and trapping ourselves in a bubble where everything in that bubble is nothing but whatever will make us feel good about ourselves. Now, the reason I say that is because the general kind of term of comfort zone, that and breaking out of it, I should say, that, description is applied to many, 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 many different things, depending on the person, depending on the person's life, depending on the people in that person's life. It's completely different. So that in and of itself is open to interpretation, but be that as it may, whatever the context is, breaking out of the comfort zone is one of the major, if not the most major thing that allows us to grow and to, as I was referring to earlier, to learn and most of all about ourselves and, what it is that we're doing, what our purpose is, what our desires are, what our drive is, what it is that really makes us happy. You won't get all the answers if you're hiding yourself in the bubble, and I feel that a lot of people, and this applies to everybody, myself included. I feel that human beings hide themselves in their bubble because, and some people would probably even say that like this is a bigger problem because of the digital age or whatever, and how culture on the internet has become kind of a thing in onto itself. But even, and maybe there's points to be had with that, but I think that it's still, it persists throughout, even before the digital age happened. I think that people, that we as people will do that. We'll hide, ourselves in the bubble, because it's like when we see a glimpse of what outside of that safety net of that comfort zone is, and that sense of uncomfortability is so incredibly fucking terrifying that it's like, I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want that. I don't want that in my life. I also want to say this too, because I think this is important to bring up. And I know that a lot of people, including maybe even the anonymous person who asked this, whether you're just, plain old shy, which is totally normal, or on a more serious note, because I want to, be fair and completely acknowledge this. This is definitely more difficult and easier for different types of people. Some people just naturally are interested and open and excited about the prospect of socializing and meeting new people and getting themselves out there and being active. And there are other people who legitimately have problems of anxiety, not being able to deal with crowds of people, not being able to deal with certain types of people or certain things in their life. And I say that because I do not want to exclude the fact that is a real thing that can happen. And I certainly don't recommend, seeking out something that's going to make you feel unsafe or upset or hurt. But again, getting back to the main sort of point, breaking out of the comfort zone, that it's a very broad term, but it's also in another way, if there's another way to describe it, it's the sense of pushing oneself to go further and to do better. That also in and of itself is, that description could be applied to a lot of different things. And to the anonymous, contributor, who submitted this, yes, clearly as an artist, it is important to be social and make friends. It's important as a human being to be social and make friends. Because while the people who we have in our lives, other people don't define who we are, the experiences that we have, and especially in a lot of cases, the experiences that we have with those other people in our lives, they define who we are. Because the experiences that you will get and what you interpret from them and what you gain from them, what you learn from them, and how you grow as a result of what you learn from them, those are the important factors as to defining who we are and to improve ourselves as people over the, however long we live. And even then too, I think if you want to get, I guess, a little scientific about it, I come to understand that very often the people who live to be past 100 are people who are very healthily active and sociable and take good care of themselves. To address the actual, like the real kind of point of the question itself, being social, comes in many, many forms. So I don't mean this as like, just go to parties and talk to whoever. Like, no. I mean, that's not always the answer for anybody and everybody. One of the positive sides of the internet also, of course, has been the fact that, people feel more comfortable with socializing in that way, because of the fact that there's not a lot of, being able to face people in person, and there's less, kind of anxiousness that comes with that, which has its, upsides and downsides in the sense of, I think that real life interaction is not replaceable necessarily with text, especially text only interactions with people. Because I as you all know, I've had many amazing, wonderful people that I've met through the internet, but most of which, thankfully, I have also gotten to either spend time with or gotten to know further in person than I did over the internet. And I still have, plenty of friends who, I haven't met in person, who I think are amazing people in and of themselves. I was just talking with Jordan Lasko, one of the head artists on Tome, who I've known for many years now. And she's a great, great person. And I still haven't gotten to meet her in person yet, which I would love to do. Jordan, if you're listening, still at some point we gotta hang out. But yeah, sorry, getting back on topic. I'm not saying that the catch-all is like, throw yourself into a giant amalgam of people. But there are always starting points. There are kind of like across the board sort of starting points that can just help as a sort of kickstart. The easiest one I've found is mutual interests, and there are so many things in life. I know this might seem like such a like duh thing to say, but there's so many things that people can connect on, from any kind of standpoint. In my early years of before I was becoming a creature of the internet as well, I made a lot of friends. I lost a lot of friends early on because of the fact that mutual interests would die out between people. And then on a separate note too, and this is a whole other subject in of itself, but also because I was very loud, obnoxious, and agitating, But again, that's and sometimes that can also go hand in hand with not if you're shy or timid, but if you're just socially awkward, which it happens. On the shy and timid side, though, I think maybe even sometimes just like being too afraid to continue a friendship, to continue a relationship with another person, in any kind of way, to any extent. If you get too in your own head, if the shyness and the quietness comes from like being too in your own head and overthinking things, and you don't, you're afraid, that can be detrimental as well. But mutual interest between people, and they don't have to be like the end all be all, but they're a perfect starting point. Kind of funnily enough, as sort of a mirroring kind of thing going on right now is the fact that Pokemon Go and how it's kind of taking over the fucking world right now. It's a game that's getting people to be social with each other and to connect and to find a mutual interest that anybody and everybody can talk about at any point. And I would bet good money that tons of people have become friends as a result of even just going outside and playing Pokemon Go together and getting to know each other, and it's sprouting into something more from there. For me, kind of on a similar coincidental kind of note, I grew up in when Pokemon was first hitting the U.S. at all, when literally everybody, most people were playing Pokemon Red and Blue and or collecting the cards and or collecting the toys and or watching the TV show. And it was something for everybody to talk about. And while the craze, was eventually not dying down, but as people were growing older and, getting into that headspace of like, well, I can't like the kid stuff anymore. I got to grow up and be cool. Some of those people carried over from elementary school into middle school, where I connected with and met more people who had mutual interests, to which expanded beyond simply Pokemon, to which expanded into, say, storytelling. I met other people who were interested in the same creative things as I was. Some of those people carried over then from middle school into high school, to where I met more people, because, in the way that my school district worked, different schools were being combined together into, middle school and then eventually our high school. And then as fate would have it, also, by that point I was meeting people on the internet, where, the excitement of like, oh wow, like immediately there's a whole, sea of people to choose from it's easier for me to find people, for me at the time to find people who have mutual interests and who I can connect with, etc. And then, people who had carried all throughout from, Mike Lucas had carried over from elementary to middle school to high school and then into college, along with people I had met in high school and then people who I had met over the internet. And it was all kind of blending together into, now years and years later, at 27 years old, I have an entire network of people, of amazing friends who we all connect. And, some in a lot of the same ways, some in different ways. And then now that we have so many life experiences under our belt, we have, we can have differing views and, differing opinions and different, things that we enjoy, different tastes, and still have an incredibly great connection with each other and care about each other. And, that whole sort of path, depending on, the differences of like who you are and where you are and what your, situation is like, but that same kind of like end result can be the same for anybody really. One of the other, major things, is having something to talk about. And this is going a step further than just the mutual interests. But, this is where going out and just trying things, just seeing what's out there, seeing what is interesting to you, seeing where you can make new experiences for yourself, not even necessarily always with other people, but just even sometimes with yourself. This also kind of ties back in with the point I made about the bubbling, because I think also if, say, I'll get more specific with this because I think that this is worth talking about here. If in your bubble of, what's making you feel safe and happy, if, say, you're just living in a world of entirely, what you're used to, which is, say, like, okay, I sit at home and I watch cartoons or play video games or read books, and that's it. And those are my life experiences, are consuming media, Not that consuming media isn't great and can, make for great inspiration as well and make people happy. That's not to denounce that. It's part of our culture as well. But, that, and then coupled with, say, I don't know, if you have an environment of, if your family is very just like maybe inattentive or overly attentive in the sense of like, you just get a pat on the head and it's like, you're not challenged, that's the best way to describe it. If you're in an unchallenging kind of atmosphere, and I don't mean necessarily adversity, although adversity is extremely important too, and I'm going to get to that later. Unchallenging is what leads to stagnation. It leads to just kind of being at a standstill. And if that's the way that you want to live your life, and I mean you in the general sense, not you the person who asked this, but then you're free to do that. That's perfectly fine if that is what you feel to be the happiest and healthiest life path that you want to walk. But that said, as this is more about people who wish to be more than that, as in they wish to be more, they want to what I hope is break out of the comfort zone and, find something more than that will then make them happier and feel healthier. Building your own life experiences, your own, interesting things of which, then when you meet other people to talk about, like, I just went rock climbing yesterday. Like, oh shit, you've been rock climbing? Wow, what's that like? It's like, it's really invigorating. Like, I feel like I'm in a different like mindset. Like, I feel like I'm almost like a different person when I'm doing, I just tossed something out of my ass. I've never been rock climbing before. But it doesn't even have to be something like that, like not even that rock climbing is so extreme or whatever, but like, it can be even just watching the news, knowing what the hell is going on in the world around you, finding more of a hobby beyond just like the consumption of media, just something that is specific to you and your life. That in and of itself, because then that also leads you to then what I think is kind of the next thing is in being well-rounded, in being an open-minded person, because when you talk about the prospect of opening up, like in the social sense, like I think that also has to do with being open in a way of understanding and being intrigued, allowing yourself to be intrigued by something that is new and different, And I think that because, and even to people who like are on the extreme side of like, if say they have some kind of like really serious sort of social anxiety, I think that even for people like that, I think that there is something exciting to the prospect of something new and unexpected. I once likened, like when I was in the midst of like writing, a while ago, I likened it kind of to the feeling of invigoration to, and I'll even use the kind of more, first world, whatever kind of example of like, watching cartoons or whatever, but I likened it to the excitement of waking up on Saturday morning and watching the newest episode of whatever and seeing how the story was going and being surprised at whatever, was happening next kind of thing. Before the digital age happened and spoilers became a fucking problem. But anyway, but that's what I mean is like, I think that learning to be open, will allow you to open up yourself. Which I think also, this is a good side of the internet is I think that, or at least I would like to believe, maybe some people would debate this depending on how certain things have gone, but I think that the internet and a lot of how the culture of different groups of people have changed, and having the internet as a platform with which to get a lot more information out there has made people, from what I have witnessed anyway, and I'm very happy about this, that this has happened, a lot more open understanding to lots and lots of different kinds of people. And I'm not even just talking like, I mean, I include them in this, but like, LGBT and, and maybe even like, other kin type stuff and, people with just different kind of quirks, or, people with, like I was saying earlier, with like, with serious issues and illnesses, mental illnesses and conditions, things like that. I think that, that the upside of having a much bigger source of information, and not even just Wikipedia, but I mean, real people who, can educate about things that maybe you might not even necessarily learn, in school or through the people that in school, you might, and I'm sure probably plenty of people do, of course. But I think that's really cool. And that's one of the things I'm very thankful for as well, is that I've learned a lot about a lot of different kinds of people, through my experiences, mostly through the people I've met on the internet. And now also, again, in my case, it's because of, for the most part, my firsthand experiences. And firsthand experiences are the ones that I think are going to be the most valuable. Second and maybe even third-hand ones certainly aren't unimportant, because if anything, something that I think is totally valid here is, one can learn a lot through witnessing the mistakes of other people. Those can serve as, in the flesh cautionary tales to be like, okay, don't do that. And, those can be very impactful and very important. But, and this is where things are going to get a little bit more serious. Not that this hasn't been relatively serious anyway, but making mistakes and learning through fucking up is also extremely important. Extremely important. Making mistakes and screwing up, whether it involves you hurting yourself in the process of that or hurting other people, or just, even if it may not be as big of a deal as you think it is, or if it is a bigger deal than you think it is, it's what's difficult about this thing is like, okay, I think about like again, I think often about when kids go to school, right? I've talked about this a little bit in the Surviving High School one. I was picked on. I wasn't bullied, because bullying, when I think of bullying, I think of like people really going like too far in terms of like people who like are like, beating other kids up, shoving them into lockers, and even beyond the physical stuff, like using like racial slurs or just like, really personal kind of insults or whatever. I get made fun of a lot for being obsessed with Pokemon because I was loud and obnoxious about it. That's being picked on. That's not being bullied. So I had it very easy. And rest assured, I am fully against any kind of bullying. However, the sad reality is that, by whatever means and for whatever reasons that kids are led to be little assholes, it's going to happen. Even if it is simply getting picked on, or a more extreme case of getting bullied, stuff like that, bad experiences are going to happen. And of course, that even bullying at school is a light example compared to things that can happen that are much, much, much worse. And I'm not going to get into all of the possible examples that those could possibly be, because, I don't need to describe those in gruesome detail. But the point being is that bad experiences, while not required, because I certainly don't wish them on anybody, and neither should any of you, but when they happen, because they do happen, they're a part of life. They're an inevitability. Even for the people who bury themselves in the safety bubble, they're still going to happen in some way, somehow. They happen, but we are capable as people of taking those experiences and also learning and growing and utilizing them into something positive for ourselves and improving ourselves in that way as well. On the social side of things, here's a great example. When I was in my first year of college, I was so sociable with a group of people. I think I have told the story before, but I'll repeat it again here for relevancy. I was part of a group of people who I wanted to be friends with, and they had no interest in being friends with me. They had all of the interest in being friends with Mike Lucas, who was, I was dorming with and who was my best friend for a very long time. And I was shunned by, that group of people. And, I learned, these people who are talking behind my back and who are treating me badly and who don't want anything to do with me, and who are, in that case, I wasn't even being bullied or picked on or abused in any way, but they just didn't like me, and they were being kind of, mean spirited, and, and I just felt like I wasn't accepted. And I was very, very lucky that Mike Lucas at the time chose to be like, all right, well, these people are being assholes, and this person is, my real friend, so I'm, not going to be part of this. And, and then from there, we went on to meet people who were much more tried and true, loyal friends. But the experience that I took away from that, and it certainly was hard. I remember at the time I had a moment where I was like, oh my God, I miss high school, which is fucking ludicrous to ever think like, oh man, I miss high school in comparison to, to college, because it seemed so much easier. And I was like, no, that was not true at all. And I quickly wised up to that. But that experience made me stronger. It made me really appreciate, for one thing, it made me really appreciate the friends that I had for, a long time by that point, for many, many years, and how they were loyal to me. And that taught me a lot about being loyal to others. Especially, when there is that mutual, adoration and respect, and, wanting to stick up for each other kind of thing. It actually, probably that experience is what, defined the trait of, like, when people pick on my friends, and like, cause like I can take when people like go, like pick on me, but like when other people are attacking like my friends or people that I know or people that I care about, then I get a lot more pissed off. But the point being is that was a bad experience I had in my life that helped, shape me in a positive way because of what I chose to do with the outcome of that experience. And considering the fact that I got to keep my best friend, at the end of it, that was a pretty low impact bad experience. I've had far worse things than that. And I think that's the thing, is like, well, that's a tame example. The point kind of persists of like, when you go through bad experiences, whether they're by your own hands, like if you fucked up and caused something to happen in that way, in my case, you could argue it was my being obnoxious and being an unlikable person to this group of people that they just didn't want to associate with me. That was the mistake that I made, and I paid for it by them not wanting to be my friends. There's another way that you can interpret that, but whether it's by your own, not volition, but whether it happens because of something that you've done, or if it's something that you had nothing to do with anything that you've done, it just something bad happens to you because, unfortunately, like I said, that's part of life. But happiness is a choice, and as Trevor Duvall once said, and you can either choose to take things personally and to be angry or be upset or be depressed, or you can choose to spin it into something positive and, carry on with your life and move forward and be better the next day. And be a better person the next day. So all of those things, for myself anyway, even though I was already, an outgoing person, all of those things, all of those life experiences were important factors into what it is that I learned about other people, about myself, and about how I and other people mesh together. And it's as a result of that I've been very, very lucky that, like I said, I have an entire massive amount of amazing people in my life who are all wonderful friends who I adore and trust, and who have been there for me through, thick and thin. And, and you who asked this question, and anybody out there listening to this, if you've been feeling the same, and, if you're, terrified of the idea of socializing, there are so many different paths you can take. There are so many different things that you can do that will lead you to having, a circle of people, no matter how small or how big, it doesn't matter. There was actually a post, I'm even going to pull it up real quick because I want to remember the name of the person. Somebody on Tumblr recently made a post It was Twilight Prince 102 made a great post talking about how they had a this is very sweet of them, in that they were talking about the tome characters and how like we often have people who are quite kind of equivalents to the main 5 characters from tome, and they were saying like, oh, reblog if you, with your squad, with your friends, if you've got that. And I reblogged it, and I was like, I can't even equate who in my life is my alpha. I mean, Mike Lucas is my alpha in terms of the character basis, but not in personality. Who is my flame girl, who is my Nylok, who's my game crazed, because I have so many. I'm incredibly lucky to have so many people who are so varied and have so many great, different opinions and experiences with which to share with me and for me to learn from. Still to this day, and to which I said to that, kind of in the spirit of what this original post was about, I said, like, to anybody out there, whether it's it's online or offline, find a group of people that you can depend on and that you connect with and that you love and that will love you, to be there for you through any circumstance. Just like Alpha and the gang from Tome, by whatever means. And, no matter whether you're shy or outgoing, introverted or extroverted, have problems to contend with that make it more difficult for you, or, if things are totally easy and you're totally on top of your shit and, you can do whatever you got to do, whether you are, a massive fuck up and, trip over yourself left and right, or, if you're, staying the course, and you have, other kinds of problems that, that are hurdles in your path. There are so many different ways, so many different paths you can take to get to this point of being healthy and being happy, through sociality, through being sociable with others, that can be there for you, and that can be those people for you. That can be, the alpha flame girl, Nylok, game craze, Kerber, whatever, and beyond, or less than that, even depending, it doesn't matter the number. There are so many different things that you can do to get to that point. And all you have to do is find the path that works best for you, and maybe none of my suggestions are relevant to that path. It might be something completely different that I didn't even speak about, because I even with my catch-all answers, they aren't, necessarily catch-all. But I hope at the very least, like I said, I just kind of hit the record button and saw however long this is going to go for. So I hope that at the very least, these last 45 minutes or so were helpful to you, Anonymous, and to anybody else listening who this might apply to. And, just don't give up either. Even if it seems difficult, if you are on the line of having a little bit more difficulty with being able to stay that course and to reach that result that you want, just don't give up. Just, if one method doesn't work, try something else. If you make a mistake, just get back up, keep moving forward, do your best. And, and if by that point, you'll know that you're doing something right if you still have tons of people who, as the reward in a way, that sounds a little weird, but, in a way for what it is that you've done is that you have these people who are here for you. You have these people who will be your friends, who will truly be your friends, people that you can always depend on. People who will always be there for you. They are out there. Even if you haven't found them yet, I promise you that they are out there. I think that it's perfectly safe for me to say that. Even if it seems like maybe it's like, oh, nobody, even if you're in a point where it's that desperate, like, I really think just out there somewhere you'll find them. Even if you haven't yet, you will eventually. So it's about all I have to say. Thanks for listening to this one, everybody. And I guess in the comments below, I don't even know what to suggest of like, what you want to leave behind. But I guess, maybe if you have anything else further to add in terms of advice to the person who asked this question, or to anybody else listening who might be still seeking, any kind of input or anything. If you have anything you want to add to the question that maybe if I have time to respond to in the comments, anything like that. And, or any examples you can give actually of, you learning to be social and you opening up more and how, that impacted your life and, anything like that whatsoever that you want to share your thoughts with, please go right ahead. And as always, if you have future Kirblog topic suggestions, maybe related to this or something completely different, you can leave a comment about that too, or hit me up on all the usual social media shit. But that's about it. So thank you all again. This was cool. I really enjoyed getting to do this one. These stream of consciousness Kirblogs are a lot of fun, and I hope that they're helpful. I really do hope that these provide even just the most minor bit of advice that might be helpful to you all. So, but yeah, that's gonna do it. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye bye.